my mind is blown that we're sitting here today and we're saying they've actually proceeded without approval and they're just putting immigrants in.
It represents security and safety for the rest of the rest of the country.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are outside of the California City Correctional Center. And as you can see, it is open. It is live. There are vans and buses, and this detention center has now been turned into an ICE facility. Today we have two very special guests. We have Tim Myers, who's running for Lieutenant Governor, and Anthony Aguero, who has been covering the border for the last 8 years. So just to introduce the issues that we're going to be talking about today. ICE has filed paperwork to open this site. They are trying to go from 41,000 beds to over 100,000 beds. The big beautiful bill has gone, it allocates $170 billion in the next 4 years. So ICE's budget is going to be jumping from $8 billion to $28 billion, and it's going to be funding facilities like the one you see in the background here. So we are very appreciative to have these two special guests here. Tim Myers, musician, Harvard alumni, businessman, candidate for Lieutenant Governor. And you have seen our state, our beautiful Golden State, just be ripped apart. The farmland is being abandoned, which is a huge issue. We've been speaking with local farmers and the impacts of, what they're experiencing. You're seeing the collapse of local businesses, especially after the COVID lockdowns. I mean, downtown Los Angeles, hugely impacted by those shutdowns. Local businesses in California are almost non-existent at this point. It's really, truly terrible. We have record-breaking homelessness, crime waves, ICE raids, soaring food and fuel prices, and your campaign is really targeting these issues. Over here to my right, we have Anthony Aguero. He is a border journalist, former Republican candidate, and founder of Border News Network. He's also a lead journalist over at TABS, which is the American border story that's going in and covering immigration and migration and all of those key issues. Anthony, you have highlighted child trafficking firsthand. You have documented drug children at the border being smuggled by cartel members. I remember just last year for the film Line in the Sand is when I first met you. And you were absolutely a border expert. You knew all the opening areas. You have documented from California all the way to Texas, even doing some coverage in New York, all about the border crisis and how it has been a huge impact, impacting the migrants, the children who are missing, 300,000, as well as working with angel families who are American citizens who have lost family members at the hands of illegal immigrants. So really full spectrum of immigration and its larger impacts. I'm going to pass it, Tim, to you first, and then I'll pass it to Anthony here. What does this site symbolize to you?
For me, it's two simple words: hate and fear. This site is a former prison now set to be an ICE detention center, and it symbolizes a moral failure in the state. It represents billions wasted on cages, kids being put into cages, families being separated, when it should be going to funding healthcare in our state, funding classrooms. It's horrific what is happening here, and my mind is blown that we're sitting here today and we're saying they've actually proceeded without approval and they're just putting immigrants in.
Thank you. Anthony?
Well, I think to me it symbolizes security and safety for the state of California, being that I've been interviewing multiple families, not just throughout the country, but a handful of individuals that live here in California who have been impacted by the whole immigration situation. These are families who have in fact lost a loved one due to a violent crime to these illegal aliens. I think it gives those families a sense of security and a way of advocating for their family's loss, that their family member did not die in vain, that something is in fact being done about it. We've witnessed so many people coming across the border in such manner when in reality, the Biden administration made it as easy as possible for these folks, going as far as giving them an application where they could go sign up and come through a legal port of entry. Now, I'm not too sure about the legalities of that, of how valid that application really was or to what extent, but when you have individuals still trying to come across the southern border through porous areas behind Border Patrol agents' backs, it just makes you think why when it's so easy just to come across through an application, are you still vouching or trying to sneak into the country? So when I see this site, you know, it represents security and safety for the rest of the rest of the country.
And just politely push back on one thing.
Sure.
You know, 1/3 of immigrants make up our workforce. That is such a high number, and 45% of our agriculture jobs. It's so important that we keep immigration here in our country. These, you know, they're detaining immigrants that are working these fields, agriculture jobs, taco stands. We saw in downtown that going to Home Depot and detaining people working in front of Home Depot. I agree with you 1000%. We need to lock up the criminals that are coming across our border, the drug cartels. Let's secure our border. Let's make it stronger. But let's not lock up people that are working fields in this country, cleaning ladies, people working at Home Depot. These aren't criminals. These are friends. These are people that I know that are good Christian people. I grew up a pastor's kid.
Okay.
And we had immigrants come to the church in Inland Empire. These are good, moral people, you know, and they shouldn't be locked up. 100,000 beds. 100,000 beds. It reminds me of the Japanese internment camps, but worse.
I mean, to that point, President Obama deported way more than what President Trump has even done, even a fraction of the numbers. By the time, if Trump continues on this pace, he won't even come nowhere near what Obama previously deported. And you mentioned about these individuals working the fields. Quite frankly, all I hear is you want more slave labor. What makes you think that migrants can't aspire to be so much more than somebody out on the field or somebody cleaning toilets? To me, that's kind of racist to imply that migrants are only good to be working the fields or to be doing some kind of cleaning people's bathrooms. Now, the thing about it is that a lot of the people that were brought across the border illegally in such manner have actually gone into debt with the cartel. Many of these individuals do not have the means or the proper way of funding such an expensive trip, and then to still be paying the cartels to get across. So what ends up happening is the cartel pretty much fronts them the trip and pretty much now enslaving them into a payment program where they have to be giving the cartels that are operating on the US side a portion, if not the majority, of their paycheck on the money that they are actually bringing home. So we're actually incentivizing more criminal activity and so much more that the cartel is just taking over this beautiful state.
Absolutely. And I agree that, you know, I agree with you on a lot of points that a lot of times people make immigration, like working the fields, like slave labor. You're 1000% correct on that. I think it's completely awful the way, but what we're talking about is what's happening in the here and now, which is people being arrested that are working these jobs, and then they're going to be put in here. Like, and this is just not right. As an American who loves this country, let's lock up the cartel. We agree on that. I think we all agree on the same thing. I just think that my heart and my compassion for folks that are just trying to have a better life for themselves are being, and they have no criminal past, they have done nothing wrong, are being locked up here.
So obviously, you guys both agree on securing the borders, right?
Absolutely.
Which is great. So how do we deal with the issues of illegal immigration but still honor people's humanity? I think that's a huge question. So, I mean, I'll put it to you, Tim, and then Anthony, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, I think it's an important question. We need to prioritize humanity. This is a human issue, and we need to look at the stories of how immigrants are coming across the border and the reasons why. One thing I want to share, though, quickly is this big beautiful bill. Let's be clear and transparent with ICE and what's going on here. The people that are benefiting are the billionaires. It's these private prison companies are going to be benefiting from this. Contractors who profit off of pain. These are the people who are benefiting. The people who suffer are the workers and us, because food prices are going to go up because of this. And I just want to be super transparent and clear who the winners and the losers are. The losers in this are us and the workers and humanity. And the people who profit are the people that we're seeing all over Trump's circle. It's all the billionaires, it's all the private companies. These are the people profiting.
Interesting. Anthony, your response to that?
Well, I think in order for us to fix this issue, we need to continue securing our southern border and come after individuals who are hiring illegal aliens that do not have their paperwork, that are not abiding by the law. I think, seasonal workers that come across the border, and we see it here in California, we see it in Arizona, those programs should continue and maybe amplify them a little bit. But as far as the whole immigration situation, I would go as far as just shutting all sorts of immigration into the country for a couple of years while we get our arrays in order. We have had way too many people come across the border illegally, which we still cannot account for. There are over 300,000 children that have gone missing into this broken system. And until we're able to put a good dent into finding those children and being able to find the individuals who are here illegally and get them out of the country, then we can resume legal migration with merits. But as far as right now, it's just like your house. When you're having an issue, a family issue with your whole family, your kids, your wife, you don't invite the neighbors to come in and make themselves at home while you're trying to, sort out the situation. You close the door, you close the windows, you sit your family down, you guys hash it out, you communicate with one another, and then later on down the line, hey, come on over, come to the carne asada if you want. But I think right now we need to focus on our country, focus on the homelessness, focus on our veterans that have been neglected for far too long, and be able to take it back to the basics. Our infrastructure in America is ridiculously gone bad. We're funding other countries to build them up, but we can't even fund our own. We need to focus on America right now and our citizens and the sovereignty of our nation.
And just to respond back to that as well, I agree with a lot of things you're saying. I think we need a tighter border. We've had, in California and other places, we've seen a big influx of immigration, right? And so it can be straining on the system. So I think we agree on, a lot of us agree on several points, tightening the border, making sure that pathway to citizenship is more clear cut, right? And modernized, right? But what's going on here is obvious and plain, I think, to everybody. This is not what we voted for. I know my parents are Republican, my brother's Republican. They didn't vote to see everyday people, 100,000 going here, being detained from, people that are working fields and working other places, like taco stands, Home Depot, that we're seeing. That's not just me coming up with this is what's happening. This is not what we all voted for.
Yeah, and Tim, you're out of Los Angeles, and so that whole city is bracing for impact on a level that is really hard to describe for the rest of the country.
Absolutely.
I mean, you guys are really seeing it firsthand, because so many people are immigrants
Yes.
in that city. Yeah, and so it's a really different story, for the state of California than say for the rest of the country. And we'll get to that. I have a question based on that in a little bit. But Anthony, you mentioned these unaccompanied minors. As I mentioned at the beginning of this interview, you have filmed children who were drugged so that they were easier to move. That was the first footage I ever saw from Anthony. And it still almost brings me to tears because of how inhumane and nothing like that should ever happen. Allie Bradley, she does incredible coverage on the border in Texas, and she did a report that 13,000 unaccompanied minors have now been located, many in abusive situations, with over 400 of these sponsors being arrested. But that leaves hundreds of thousands still unaccounted for, and HSI has reported that these children are often used as currency, as Anthony has mentioned, recycled by cartel and abandoned as payment and they're being falsely paired with adults so that they can cross illegally. And so I want to ask both of you guys, what does this tell us again about the real cost of a broken immigration system, and what specific policy or enforcement do you guys believe could help this stop from ever happening again? Largest humanitarian crisis that we've seen in America and in the history of America, I believe. How do we put these kids as priority and put in some policies that we can never see this happen again? Tim, I'll go to you, and then Anthony.
Honestly, as somebody that has a 13 and 10-year-old, and hearing about children being drugged and trafficked in just completely rips my heart out. How is this happening in 2025? It's horrible. And I think here in California we need to address it head on. In Sacramento with policies, and as lieutenant governor I would work with the governor and work with our Senate to create policies so this never happens. But Trump needs to take charge with this issue. We all need to come together as Democrats, Republicans, to solve child trafficking and make sure this never happens. And my heart breaks hearing about this. And as a dad of 2 daughters, I would do everything in my power to fight for children being safe.
Well, I think Trump, by getting rid of the USA aid, is a massive, great start, because much of the funding for this child trafficking that was happening on the southern border was done through NGOs who received billions of dollars particularly during the Biden administration. Leaving the UN and not going by any of the treaties that we have signed up for immigration would be another avenue that we should be exploring, because they are partially responsible for much of the people arriving on the southern border. There is what's called the Agenda 2030, and overstimulating and overwhelming our system is their number one goal. They are trying to break the United States by overwhelming us with a dependent class on our resources. And so they were pretty much on point and on set to continue that. And like I mentioned earlier, President Biden actually removed any kind of DNA testing that was being provided by DHS when these children were coming in at such an alarming rate. Now, the cause of the video that I documented, where the kids were just lumped over, drugged on Rohypnol, from what experts tell me, is it happened nearly a week after Biden actually removed any kind of DNA testing, in which these kids were being brought at an alarming rate. Many of these kids were in fact recycled. I know situations of kids in Yuma being recycled, meaning that they come across illegally with an adult. They go through the processing and the holding facility, and then the individual that gets released with that child gives that child back to the criminal cartel. They take the kid back to Mexico, and the child does the process multiple times, up to 13, 14, 15 times with different people. So the whole DNA testing is a very, very good idea for us to continue, and harsher penalties on individuals that are trafficking these kids, whether they're a migrant or not. I think if we toughen up on the criminal part of all of this, giving these individuals much harsher penalties, such as maybe like 20 years sentence, no questions asked, full time. You have to do the full time if you're caught trafficking children or trafficking anybody for that matter. That would be a start, but definitely coming down a lot harder on these individuals.
Yeah, I actually work with a network that watches human trafficking all across the country, and they can't actually go after individuals just based on human trafficking because they'll be out in a week or two or whenever they can make bail. And so, I mean, that's a huge issue, and I completely agree with you. You know, they have to do, it's like a triangle. So they have to get them on money laundering, drug smuggling, and the human trafficking, just to get them a sentence that actually gets them locked up for a significant amount of time. So I completely agree with you, Anthony, on that. Now we're going to be finishing up here. This is a great conversation. I appreciate it so much. You know, we were talking earlier about how Los Angeles is feeling the impacts probably more than any other state or region in America. So this is, again, a question for both of you guys, and I appreciate the respectfulness and the insights from both sides. Do you think
we're actually on the right and left side right
now? Yeah,
yeah, there you go.
And I grew up a pastor's kid, you know, with parents that are still Republican, and this is dinner conversations we have all the time. And I just want to say, as Lieutenant Governor, you have a seat at my table always.
I greatly appreciate that. That's awesome.
Always love to
civil
talk to you
discourse
about
is always.
It's not even discourse. It's like, how do we solve this together?
Exactly.
And I don't know everything.
Right.
Just because I went to some Ivy League school doesn't make me like, you know so much, and you've made this your life. And so I respect you so much, and I want to hear more. And I don't know everything. I want to learn more, and so this is what it's about. Absolutely,
and I appreciate you taking the time, like I told you earlier, to be willing to have these conversations. You know, these tough conversations that most people in your position cower away from. So you earn my respect. Absolutely.
Thank you. And a lot of people have gotten it wrong, right? Like Biden did things that were wrong, and Trump is doing things right now that's wrong. Like, no one's perfect. It's not so black and white. It's nuanced, like we were saying. We need to figure this out together to solve this problem. It's a big problem.
Absolutely. And this is why I founded my news organization, The Protagonist. We are apolitical, and we want to have conversations that bridge the left and the right, and talk to people that are brave enough to sit in these hot seats and have these kind of conversations. So my last question for you guys, or I may have two more, but we're going to wrap it up here. My question is, obviously Los Angeles, huge impacts, right? I mean, the state of California is feeling the impacts of ICE and immigration, the immigration crisis to a very deep extent. Do you think that the state should handle immigration issues, or should this be a federal issue? Like, should states take these issues into their own hands because of such unique circumstances, or should this stay at the federal level?
I think it's both. And I think, you know, the state and the federal government need to work together to solve this issue. But, you know, Trump's $170 billion enforcement bill, $28 billion alone is going to ICE, like you pointed out. This makes it the highest funded law enforcement agency in the nation. I don't agree with that. I don't agree we should be putting $28 billion into ICE right now when, you know, we're cutting cancer research now in California. We're cutting Medicaid that millions of Californians rely on, classrooms, teachers. Like, this is awful, and I just want to hammer that point home that there's ways to do this without putting $28 billion into ICE and putting 100,000 working people here.
Yeah, Anthony, I'm so curious on your perspective on that.
I think when the security and sovereignty and safety of this nation come into play, state and federal government should be able to work alongside one another, especially in law enforcement. Law enforcement should be able to have a bridge and not a gap amongst themselves, so that we're able to continue living in a prosperous manner and not have any violent criminals or wanted criminals or fugitives from other countries wandering the streets. Especially out here in California, it's one of the biggest economies in the world. People pay a lot of money in taxes, and they should not have to be subjecting themselves to walking around with criminals, rapists, or whatever you might have out here. The fact of the matter is that millions of people came in across the border illegally, many undetected, and many are here to cause harm. And the federal government right now, it's their job and their responsibility to keep us secure, and they're trying to do their best with what they can. I wish we'd have more funding, and even with the funding that they already currently have, they're having a hard time finding and tracking down these individuals. When it comes to kids and the safety of these children that have been brought across the border in such manner, there should be no limit as to how much money we're willing to spend for a safe return for them back to their country safely.
I truly appreciate both of your time coming out here. I mean, we are in the middle of nowhere right now.
It feels emotional too.
Yes. Oh yeah. I mean, this is raw. It's real. To our audience out there watching, we truly appreciate you engaging in this conversation because we believe it to be very, very important. And to both of my guests here, thank you guys so much for making the trek out here to be outside of this newly opened ICE detention center. It's going to be the largest in the state. To talk about these issues because they're hugely impactful, especially in the state of California, but all throughout the nation. So thank you guys all so much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks again for your time. It was a pleasure. Look forward to a future update.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.